It's hard to admit this out loud, but sometimes I feel invisible, like I'm a ghost haunting my own family's story. I'm Paisley Hughes, 41 years old, a senior financial analyst in downtown Chicago. Nearly 2 decades in this relentless world of numbers and budgets have made me steady, dependable, the kind of person you don't notice until something breaks. That's me, the family's quiet backbone. I pay bills, mediate fights, and keep everything from collapsing, all while staying tucked away, hoping to avoid drama. Just last month, I withdrew $7,200 from my savings to cover Mom's property taxes. No thank yous, no recognition, not even a glance. Meanwhile, my cousin Joshua Jones, the so-called golden boy, moved in just for a week, 14 months ago, and hasn't paid a dime since. It's almost impossible to bring it up without stirring up emotions and accusations. Joshua has this uncanny way of twisting stories, making me appear selfish or unreasonable. But I'm beginning to sense something deeper beneath the surface. What no one knows is I own the deed to the family home. A quiet, powerful leverage I've never even hinted at. I keep this card close to my chest because I still believe family matters can be resolved with kindness and patience. Yet, inside, the scales are shifting. The weight of being taken for granted, the constant balancing act, is wearing me thin. I walk the thin line between hope and resignation, still clutching onto the hope that love and loyalty can hold us together. But each day chips away at that hope, and I wonder how long I can keep my silence before the cracks show. I remember one night not long ago, sitting alone in the dim light of my apartment. The city buzzed faintly beyond the window, but inside, I felt the quiet hum of exhaustion. I'd just paid the utility bills again, another $450, and Joshua was still lounging in the spare room downstairs, oblivious to the strain. Maybe I'm just soft, I told myself. Maybe I'm giving too much. But the truth was, I felt trapped in a role I never chose, but couldn't escape. The house, the money, the endless demands. It all felt like chains disguised as duty. I wanted to speak up, to say, enough. But the fear of family drama held me back, whispering that peace was worth more than pride. Yet, as I stared at the blank screen of my laptop, I knew something had to change. The quiet was becoming unbearable. Growing up was no different. Joshua always basked in the spotlight, soaking up attention like sunlight through a window, while I was the shadow in the corner. At every family reunion, my parents lavished him with praise and gifts, the golden cousin who could do no wrong. I remember being 15, sick with the flu, curled up on the couch the night of the holiday dinner. Joshua was off at some talent show, performing, dazzling everyone. Dad called him the family's future that night, while I felt invisible, like a ghost no one noticed. I stayed home because my mom insisted I was strong enough to handle things on my own, but the words stung more than any illness. It wasn't just neglect. It was a subtle message that I was less worthy of attention or praise. I rationalized it as tough love, or just their way of showing affection, but the wound settled deep. Joshua's jealousy simmered beneath his easy smile, manifesting in sharp, biting comments disguised as teasing. "Still the good girl, huh?" he'd say with a smirk, and something inside me would twist. The family never saw me as an equal. I was the dependable one, the responsible one, the one expected to pick up the slack while Joshua took center stage. Even now, those old wounds ache, resurfacing whenever the family dynamics shift. I learned early to keep my head down, to absorb the pain silently, because speaking up only meant stirring the pot. Over the years, my sacrifices piled up quietly like dust on the corners of the house. I've poured over $150,000 into the mortgage, property taxes, and repairs. Money that came straight from my paycheck, often at the cost of my own dreams. I postponed vacations, delayed promotions, and missed countless family events, all to keep the family home standing. When Joshua lost his job, I didn't hesitate to offer him a room, thinking a week or two would help him get back on his feet. 14 months later, he's still there, and not a single dollar has come from him toward rent or utilities. Daniel, my husband, has asked if I'm being taken advantage of, his voice gentle but concerned, yet I always brushed it off. clinging to the hope of family harmony. Lisa, my sister, and Mom have been aware of these sacrifices, yet gratitude has been rare. Joshua never lifted a finger around the house. He left the chores, the bills, and the constant upkeep to me. I covered everything silently, wearing patience like armor. The house is legally mine, a fact I've kept secret, hoping trust and love would be enough to hold the family together. Daniel knows about the deed, and Lisa has hinted at her awareness, but the others remain blissfully ignorant. This quiet power I hold is like a secret weapon I'm not ready to use. I tell myself it's better this way. But beneath the surface, the foundation of trust is cracking, and I feel the pressure mounting every time Joshua walks through the door. Last Christmas was the breaking point, though I didn't realize it at the time. We were all gathered in the living room, the tree twinkling behind us, when I gently asked Joshua if he could contribute to the utility bills. His response was like a slap. "Look who's turning into a cold landlord!" He sneered loudly, the room falling uncomfortably silent. Mom's eyes darted away, and Lisa shifted in her seat, avoiding my gaze. Joshua's smirk was sharp, venomous. "Maybe Paisley's forgotten we're family," he said, and the sting of those words cracked something inside me. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and hurt swirling in my chest. I wanted to disappear. I forced a shaky laugh and said, "I just want some help around the house," but his words echoed in the silence that followed. That night, I left the room early, retreating to the quiet refuge of our bedroom. Daniel asked what was wrong, and I whispered, "I shouldn't have brought it up." The fear of rocking the boat overwhelmed me, and I pushed my feelings down, still hoping Joshua would change. That family loyalty was enough, but the seed of doubt was planted deep. Maybe kindness wasn't enough to shield me after all. The fragile peace I'd maintained was slipping through my fingers, and I wasn't sure I knew how to hold on anymore. After I finally voiced my frustrations subtly, hoping it would wake Joshua up, the backlash hit faster than I expected. It wasn't just silent resentment anymore. It was a full-on counterattack. Word spread through the family grapevine that I had kicked him out like a dog, as if I'd thrown him out onto the street unceremoniously. I could almost hear Joshua's smirking voice behind every whispered accusation. The relatives who once ignored my quiet contributions suddenly called me too controlling, cold, and selfish, as if turning their backs on me was easier than facing the truth. I started noticing cousins and aunts exchanging glances, their expressions heavy with doubt. Then came the calls. Mom's voice trembled on the phone, heavy with confusion and hurt. "Joshua says you forced him out, Paisley. Is that true?" she asked. Her words clawed at me because I knew she had listened to Joshua's version, not mine. Lisa's advice was just as painful, a mix of dismissal and caution. "Maybe it's better to just let it go for peace's sake, Pace." The gaslighting began in earnest. Phrases like, "you're too sensitive," and "you're imagining things," echoed in my mind whenever I tried to stand up for myself. It was a slow erosion, a mental tug-of-war that made me question my own reality. In the silence of my apartment, I wrestled with the gnawing sense of isolation. I felt the walls closing in, the burden of unspoken resentment growing heavier. Did I really overreact? Was I the problem? The doubt was suffocating. Yet beneath the doubt, a stubborn flame refused to die out. I wasn't going to let Joshua rewrite the story of our family or erase my contributions. I clung to that defiance because it felt like the only thing left that was truly mine. The house, the bills, the sacrifices, no one else saw them, but they were real, and so was my resolve. Still, the loneliness was crushing. I found myself second-guessing every conversation, every gesture. The family I had held on to, fragile and fractured, seemed to be slipping further away. Joshua's whispers were poison, but the silence from those I loved was worse. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit by the window and watch the city lights flicker, wondering if I could hold on to this family or if it was already too late. Only the small voice inside, fierce and unyielding, kept me from falling apart completely. Determined not to let things spiral further, I arranged a meeting, one last attempt at peace. I invited Mom and Lisa, hoping their presence would balance the conversation, and maybe, just maybe, bring some reason back into the room. I sat across from Joshua, my voice steady as I laid out the facts. $8,400 in unpaid rent, the utility bills I'd absorbed, and the quiet expectation of mutual respect that hadn't been met. I watched as his face twisted from hurt to something calculating. When he spoke, the tears came on cue. "You're betraying family," he wailed, voice cracking like I was the villain in his tragic play. Mom's reaction stung more than Joshua's theatrics. "Family sticks together, Paisley," she said firmly, her eyes not quite meeting mine. It was as if my years of sacrifice didn't count, as if the rules of this family favored loyalty to the loudest voice. Lisa looked uncomfortable, caught in the middle, but said little. The mediator's role dissolved beneath Joshua's flood of emotion and Mom's unwavering support of him. My concerns were brushed aside like unwelcome dust, and I left that room feeling smaller than when I'd arrived. The hope I'd clung to, that peaceful, fair solutions were possible, flickered and dimmed. I thought maybe if I just explained, if I just showed the numbers, the truth might be undeniable. But truth wasn't enough here. It never was. Walking away from that meeting, the weight in my chest was heavier than before. I felt defeated, yet a stubborn part of me refused to give in completely. Perhaps peace wasn't an option, but I wasn't ready to surrender the fight. The family I dreamed of was slipping further away, but I still wanted to believe in fairness, even if it seemed out of reach. Weeks later, the cruelty took a darker turn. I was cornered at a work event, the last place I expected to be ambushed. Joshua was there, smiling that sly, knowing smile, speaking loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. He revealed private details I'd shared in confidence, my financial struggles, the tension at home, the quiet sacrifices I made for family. He spun it as if I were throwing family under the bus, painting me as cold and merciless. I could feel my cheeks burn with humiliation as I saw colleagues exchanging glances, disbelief flashing in their eyes. Daniel was there too, and the hurt on his face cut through me like a knife. He whispered later, "Is that how they see you?" The spillover from family drama into my professional life was staggering. Clients, once respectful and warm, now asked if I was really that cold or too rigid to trust. The humiliation was sharp and public. Each word Joshua spat a calculated jab meant to dismantle everything I'd worked for. It wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding anymore. This was a deliberate dismantling of my reputation, designed to isolate me further, to break me down piece by piece. In that crowded room, surrounded by familiar faces turned doubtful, I felt exposed and vulnerable. The mask of control I wore cracked, revealing the raw ache beneath. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just family drama. It was warfare. Joshua was not just a spoiled cousin. He was a calculated adversary who knew exactly which buttons to press to unravel me. The sting of betrayal was deep, but it also ignited something fierce inside me. This wasn't the end, I vowed silently, but it was a brutal awakening to the reality I faced. I tried one last time to bridge the chasm between us. I invited Joshua to dinner, hoping for a genuine conversation. The house was quiet except for the clink of silverware and the faint hum of the city outside. I looked him in the eyes and said plainly, "I want us to be family, but I need honesty and respect." I laid out my boundaries clearly, my voice steady despite the trembling inside. I hoped for a flicker of understanding, some sign he wanted the same peace, but instead, he smiled, a cold, twisting smile that made my stomach knot. "You want control, not family," he said, voice dripping with contempt. The words fell like ice, freezing the hope I'd tried to nurture. That night, vulnerability turned to sharp rejection. He crossed every line he swore he wouldn't, spreading poison to Mom and Lisa like wildfire. The family I'd tried to protect, to hold together, was fracturing beyond repair. I understood then, with a painful clarity, that I had done everything I could. The door to peace was slammed shut. Pain mingled with resolve, and despite the ache, I knew the fight ahead was mine alone to face. After that dinner, the storm only grew worse. Joshua's whispers multiplied, spreading like wildfire through the family branches. Cousins I once shared smiles with now avoided my gaze, smoothing over the cracks with thin, polite nods, but no warmth. "She's tearing the family apart," I overheard at one gathering, voices hushed but heavy with accusation. Daniel was my anchor, his steady presence the one thing that kept me grounded, but even he couldn't protect me from the cold shoulders and the subtle exclusion. I felt the walls closing in, the weight of isolation pressing against my chest like a vice tightening with every passing day. I began to question everything, my actions, my feelings, even my worth. Was I really the problem? The thought gnawed at me relentlessly. Maybe I was too sensitive, letting hurt pile up until it became unbearable. Maybe I'd been too demanding, expecting too much from people who only knew how to take. I stared at the ceiling most nights, running the scenarios again and again, searching for where I had gone wrong. Exhaustion seeped deep into my bones, the kind that no amount of sleep could fix. The sacrifices I'd made, the years of silent giving, felt like footprints erased by Joshua's storms, invisible and unappreciated. But beneath the doubt, a fragile spark flickered. It was a quiet, stubborn ember that refused to be snuffed out by whispers and accusations. I realized I was tired of being the scapegoat, the one blamed for the family's fractures. I was done shouldering burdens alone while others walked away unscathed. The thought of surrender was tempting. It would be simpler, easier, less painful. But something inside me whispered, not this time. I was reaching a breaking point, but not the kind that crumbles. This was the kind that steels you, that begins to harden pain into resolve. Even in my lowest moments, that small voice pushed me forward. A readiness stirred, a readiness to stop being the victim, to stop shrinking myself to fit a family that no longer saw me. The loneliness was suffocating, yet it forced clarity. If I was going to survive this, I had to find strength not in their acceptance, but in myself. The long nights of doubt and silence were shaping me into someone new, someone who might finally demand the respect and fairness I deserved. The first step was simply acknowledging that I was done being invisible. Then it happened, the moment that shattered everything. The family gathered for an estate meeting, a formal, tense air thick in the room. I sat there, bracing myself when the bomb dropped. Mom had signed over a large portion of her inheritance, $250,000 to Joshua. Without my knowledge, without my consent, the money should have been mine, legally and morally. I saw Lisa seated quietly nearby, her silence a heavy weight pressing down on me. Joshua's smug grin cut through the room as he declared, "Finally getting what I deserve." His words were a knife twisting in the wound, a cruel celebration of his victory. I felt the room tilt, the air grow cold. Something inside me snapped, like glass shattered, then crystallized into something sharp and unyielding. Years of betrayal, being overlooked and manipulated, flooded through me in a wave of bitter clarity. Hope, fragile and flickering, died that day. It was replaced by something colder, harder, a resolve that burned away illusions. The legal rights ignored, the sacrifices dismissed, all of it converged in that moment, demanding recognition. I didn't say a word. I stood, the noise of the room fading into the background, and left without looking back. The veil was lifted. I was no longer the hopeful peacemaker. I was ready to fight. Alone in the quiet aftermath, I replayed the betrayal over and over. Childhood memories mingled with adult sacrifices, each moment a stitch in the fabric of my pain. The rawness of it stung deeply, but beneath the ache something else welled up. Anger, not the reckless kind, but the cold, burning kind that sharpens focus and fuels purpose. This wasn't a fluke, a misunderstanding, or just bad luck. It was a pattern, a corrosive family dynamic of jealousy and entitlement I had ignored for too long. And now, I could no longer ignore it. I saw clearly for the first time. I had power, real power. The house deed in my name, the legal documents, my financial control. For years, this power had lay dormant, a secret shield I never drew. But now it was awake, pulsing beneath the surface, waiting. The grief I carried transformed into a strategic determination that chilled me with its precision. I vowed, silently but fiercely, that never again would I allow others to dictate my worth or trample over me. The time for silent sacrifice was over. From this pain, a new version of me emerged, unyielding, calculated, prepared. Later, I sat down with Daniel. The weight of everything pressed between us like a storm waiting to break. I shared my plan, the outline of what I intended to do. "It's time to use the legal rights Mom and Joshua think I don't have," I said, my voice steady but laced with the steel of resolve. Daniel looked at me, his cautious eyes betraying relief and hope. "You've been too kind for too long," he said. "Now it's about protecting what's yours." His support was a balm, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone. We identified Joshua as the main obstacle, the manipulator whose grip I needed to break. Our first step was clear: gather every relevant document, every proof, every piece of evidence. Preparation was everything. For the first time, I felt a strategic calm settle over me, a shift from emotional overwhelm to tactical clarity. The fight ahead was no longer about hurt feelings or family drama. It was about cold, hard legal and financial reality, and I was ready. I spent nights poring over every financial record I could get my hands on: mortgage statements, bank accounts, property deeds, even the will tucked away in Mom's files. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Joshua had no legal foothold. Not a single document granted him tenancy, ownership, or inheritance rights to the family home. Every unpaid rent check, every utility bill absorbed by me was a piece of undeniable proof. I realized how much he had relied on family generosity, often at my expense, living rent-free while spinning tales of entitlement to others. The weight of that truth settled heavily on my chest, but it also sparked a fierce clarity. I wasn't the one vulnerable here. They needed me more than I needed them. My next step was to meet with my attorney. The office was sterile and quiet, but her words rang with undeniable strength. "Paisley," she said, folding the papers across the desk, "you hold all the cards. Legally, Joshua is a squatter. The will explicitly favors you. There's no ambiguity here." Her confirmation was like a lifeline tossed through the storm. I left with a folder stuffed with emails, bank statements, and even security footage showing Joshua entering the house without paying for it. I could feel the scales tipping, the power shifting into my hands. For so long, I'd carried the weight of sacrifice in silence, but now I held the leverage. The family drama had a new axis, one that I controlled. Sitting alone that night, I cataloged every vulnerability Joshua had. Unpaid bills, no rental agreement, no claim to inheritance. I also documented my own contributions, the mortgage payments I made on time, the years I held the family home together when no one else did. The contrast was sharp, almost brutal. I scribbled notes late into the night, creating a blueprint of leverage and proof. The quiet urgency thrummed beneath my skin, a cold pulse reminding me that this was no longer about forgiveness or peace. It was about survival and justice. Somehow, in this tangled mess of family betrayal, I had found my foothold. As I prepared these documents, I couldn't help but think about all the times I had been overlooked, the kindness mistaken for weakness. But now, with the evidence in my hands, I felt something shift inside me. There was no room left for doubt or hesitation. I was done being the family's silent provider who got trampled on. The narrative would change, whether they liked it or not. I whispered to myself, they underestimated me. And with that, a cold determination settled over me, steady and unyielding, ready to face whatever came next. Quietly, I set about updating every legal document linked to the house and our shared accounts. Passwords were changed. No more access for Joshua or anyone who might leak information. I notified the attorney to place formal notices on the property, documenting Joshua's unauthorized residency. But outside this meticulous preparation, I wore my usual mask of calm. At family gatherings, I smiled warmly, joked softly, and kept conversations light. Lisa noticed my steadiness and commented once, "You're really keeping the peace, Pace." She had no idea how carefully I was guarding this fragile calm, how much planning churned beneath that quiet exterior. Daniel became my silent partner in this phase. He helped me monitor the house, discreetly capturing evidence of Joshua's disregard for bills and responsibilities. His presence was a comfort, a reminder I wasn't entirely alone in this fight. We communicated in hushed tones and subtle glances, our shared secret creating a bond stronger than words. The tension felt like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon, invisible to most, but palpable to those who knew where to look. I measured each step with precision. No rash moves, no emotional outbursts. This was the calm before the storm, and I intended to strike with cold, calculated justice. Despite the turmoil inside, I maintained an outward appearance of normalcy. I answered calls with my usual warmth, laughed softly when appropriate, and steered family conversations away from conflict. It was exhausting, but necessary. The family believed I was simply trying to keep the peace, unaware that beneath the surface I was quietly dismantling Joshua's grip. The house, once his fortress, was now my territory to protect. Every password changed, every legal update filed, was a brick in the wall I was building around what was mine. Behind that calm facade, I felt the steady pulse of control return, faint, but growing stronger with every day. One evening, just as I was settling in after a long day of compiling evidence, Lisa approached me quietly. She held a thick folder, her hands trembling slightly. "I can't stay silent anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the city outside the window. My heart pounded as she slid the documents across the table. Paper trails, bank records, shell company filings. Lisa confessed she had uncovered something devastating. Mom had been siphoning over $500,000 of the inheritance money through secret shell companies, funneling large sums to Joshua and herself illegally. She looked at me, eyes pleading for trust. "I was complicit, but I want to make this right," she said. Shock surged through me, an icy wave crashing against the walls I'd built inside. This betrayal was deeper and more tangled than I'd imagined. Mom, the woman I thought I could count on, had been playing a double game, greedy and deceitful, just like Joshua. The entire foundation of Joshua's claim was built on lies and stolen money. The weight of this revelation both shattered and steeled me. I realized the family fractures were far worse than I'd known, but now I had something precious, an unexpected ally, and concrete proof to wield. Lisa's quiet support gave me new ammunition and renewed urgency. As I digested the shock, I felt a flicker of vindication. Joshua's stories were exposed as the cover for a much darker betrayal. This wasn't just a squabble over rent or respect. It was a web of deceit involving the very people I had trusted most. The realization that Lisa, who had once seemed distant, was now standing with me reinforced my resolve. The game had changed, and I was no longer fighting alone or blindly. With the new evidence in hand, the path forward was clearer. I whispered to myself, "This ends now." The family's secrets were unraveling, and I was ready to expose every thread. The first move was swift and deliberate. Through my attorney, I formally notified Joshua that his tenancy was illegal, demanding payment for $12,600 in unpaid rent, 8 months of absences, utilities, and ignored bills. The letter was cold and precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. I told Daniel to stop covering the household expenses Joshua refused to pay. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was the first crack in his facade. Slowly, the family began to notice subtle shifts. Joshua was no longer invited to meetings, his access to the house restricted quietly but firmly. The exclusion was deliberate and non-negotiable. I also sent Mom and Lisa the legal documents proving the inheritance irregularities. The evidence was undeniable, and delivered with the cold professionalism this situation demanded. Joshua's carefully constructed mask began to crack. He confronted me once, eyes blazing with entitlement and anger. "You're making a huge mistake," he hissed. But I stood firm, voice steady and unyielding. "This isn't about mistakes, Joshua. It's about justice." The weight of years spent absorbing his abuse melted away in that moment, replaced by a calm strength I hadn't felt in a long time. Daniel watched this transformation with quiet pride. "You're not the same woman they thought they could break," he said softly after the confrontation. I nodded, feeling the truth of it deep in my bones. I had moved from silent sufferer to commanding force. Every action, every legal notice, every boundary set was a declaration. This family could no longer take me for granted. The slow dismantling of Joshua's control had begun. The game was underway. Not with shouting and scenes, but with calculated, relentless precision. And I was ready for every move. The family room buzzed with uneasy murmurs as I laid out the carefully gathered evidence. Legal deeds, financial statements, Lisa's testimony, all spread across the dining table like weapons of truth. Joshua's confident smirk, once so assured, faltered as I spoke calmly but firmly. "Joshua," I said, voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me, "you have no legal rights to this house or the inheritance, and Mom's actions were not only deceitful, but illegal." The words hung in the air, slicing through years of lies and silence. Mom opened her mouth to interrupt, her eyes wild with desperation, but the room's atmosphere shifted palpably. Even distant relatives leaned in, their faces etched with shock and disbelief. I felt a strange surge, not just of vindication, but of quiet power, as I declared, "This family will no longer tolerate lies or theft. The home and inheritance remain mine by law." Joshua sank into his chair, the color drained from his face. The once untouchable figure was undone, exposed under the clear light of truth. The respect, long withheld from me, shifted visibly toward my side, no longer the overlooked provider, but the rightful bearer of justice and dignity. The aftermath of that confrontation rippled quickly through our family's fragile web. Joshua's world began to crumble with alarming speed. His usual inflow of support dried up as relatives who had once whispered sympathy started questioning his narrative. Financial desperation sharpened his edges. Calls and messages flooded my phone, frantic and pleading, begging for forgiveness or a chance to explain. He even showed up unannounced at Daniel's workplace, his voice hoarse, eyes wild with panic and shame as he demanded to talk. I did not respond. My boundaries, once blurred by kindness, were now ironclad. Meanwhile, Mom's reputation took a steep dive as relatives confronted her, armed with Lisa's revelations and legal proof. She scrambled to contain the damage, offering false apologies that rang hollow, desperate to patch a crumbling facade. But the damage was done. The family's old order, once so neatly arranged, was unraveling. I watched it all with a steady heart, knowing that trust, once broken, demanded consequences. I was no longer a passive player in this unraveling. This was justice unfolding. Joshua's desperation grew uglier and louder in the weeks that followed. He unleashed a barrage of emotional blackmail, threats of lawsuits, and false accusations, painting himself as the victim of a cruel and heartless me. Flying monkeys, distant relatives loyal to him, circulated his narrative, pressuring me to relent and keep the peace. I met every attempt with unshakable calm, having fortified myself with legal counsel whose confidence bolstered my resolve. None of his tactics worked. The once loyal camp started to fracture. Some family members came forward to apologize for their earlier doubts and hesitations. I accepted a few, still cautious and measured, but I held firm limits. Joshua's isolation deepened with every failed maneuver. His influence shattered. The family's power dynamic shifted irreversibly. The manipulator was now the one left exposed and alone. Watching him shrink from his former arrogance, I felt a bittersweet sense of closure. The fight had been brutal, but the victory was mine. 6 months later, a calm I hadn't known in years settled over me. The family home was secure, the inheritance restored where it belonged. Daniel and I carved out a life marked by peace rather than manipulation. Our bond deepened by the trials we had endured. Joshua remained silent, his absence a quiet testament to the consequences of his choices. Mom was estranged, her access restricted by new legal agreements that guarded the boundaries I had fought so hard to establish. Lisa stayed by my side, a bridge to some of the fractured relationships, yet respecting the limits we now needed. I no longer sought approval from those who had betrayed me. My worth was no longer tethered to family acceptance, but to the strength I had found in protecting myself and those I loved. The future stretched out before me, open, uncertain, but filled with a genuine, quiet hope. For the first time in a long time, I was free.